Welcome to Cash Chats with me, Andy Webb from BeCleverWithYourCash.com. This is the podcast to help you make the most of your money. In episode 373, it's Your Money This Week, where myself and a very special guest are going to be taking you through the latest money news stories. And let's get straight into it, and let me introduce you to Amelia, who, if you watched the episode a month ago, you already would have met, but Amelia is now, and this is very exciting to share this with you all, Amelia is our new deputy editor for Be Clever With Your Cash. So she is part of the team, and you will be seeing her and hearing her a lot more on the website, on the podcast, and on the YouTube channel over the coming months. Starting with the return of this is hopefully a regular weekly feature on the show. So Amelia, hello, welcome.
Hi.
To the team.
Thank
It's
you.
very exciting.
I know, I was going to say thank you for having me, but that feels like a guest, so I'll say it's good to be here.
It is really good you're here, yeah, and I'm really looking forward to having someone else to talk to on a regular basis on these shows, so it's not just me speaking to everyone. But yeah, so what we're going to do today, though, is we are going to look at some of the big money stories over the last month. And these are kind of the things that we think you guys listening and watching at home are hopefully going to worth you guys knowing about it. And the first one we've got here is around pay, isn't it? There are obviously a lot of things happening with pay going on at the moment. But for those people who are on, well, I could say about to say the minimum wage, but that's not quite right, is it? There has been some good news, but it's kind of maybe artificially good news. What's been happening here?
Yeah, so this was announced in the budget and, kind of to much kind of fanfare, kind of support for lower wage workers. And on Monday, we saw the national living wage increase from 10.42 an hour to 11.44 an hour. It now also covers people from the age of 21 rather than 23. So it's a broader spectrum of people who get this pay rise. It means that it's an extra £1,800 a year in the pay packet of a full-time worker. However, they're still £1,092 short each year and more than £3,300 short in London compared to the real living wage. So this is a voluntary wage that's paid by more than 14,000 organisations in the UK, and it's based on the real cost of living. At the moment, it's £12 an hour, but it's also weighted to London. So people who are getting paid this wage in London get 13, 15 pounds an hour, and it also applies to people from the age of 18 upwards. So it's an interesting one because the national living wage sort of suggests that it would cover living costs, but actually there's been some quite scary reports that came up last year, from the Living Wage Foundation that found that 60% of people earning below the real living wage had visited a food bank in the past year, and 39% regularly skip meals for financial reasons. So it's really not kind of covering the essential costs of these workers.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So this idea that they're giving us a living wage was I think some very, very clever spin by then Chancellor George Osborne back in 2016, where they basically just rebranded the minimum wage and called it the living wage. And it's almost like, look, job's done. It's not a minimum wage anymore. It's a living wage, but it's still a minimum wage. It still isn't actually enough to meet those general living costs that, as you share those figures you showed, that shortfall every single year that people are going to be facing. So yeah, it's a bit cheeky when they do this, and you said as well, like, there was fanfare behind it, and do you know what, they have increased this living wage by more than inflation for the last couple of years. So they have been increasing it quite a lot. That difference is smaller than potentially it would have been in the past, but still really, really cheeky.
A rise is a rise, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it is, still more than £1,000 a year. But when you kind of compare it to other kind of wages, and we've got the cost of living crisis, we've got inflation, we've got everything else, and it's really not hitting the mark.
Yeah, and I think what's also interesting in this story as well, that yes, we've had larger than inflation increases for the last couple of years, but that's actually going to stop now because employers have said this is too much. We can't afford to pay that wage, particularly smaller employers. There are those loads, like you said, doing the real living wage, but there are a number who aren't. So these increases are being paused for now. That is obviously the current government. Will they still be our government when this decision happens next time? Probably not. But it could be that if that is the case and this pause does happen, then that increase is just going to start, that difference is going to start getting bigger and bigger each time, isn't it? Now, it's not just people who are on that living wage who obviously been feeling the pinch. We all have been with the increased costs, but there's an interesting story that you spotted here around ethical shopping and how that's been impacted.
Yeah, so we've had some figures from the group behind the fair trade mark. So that's the symbol you see on bananas, you see it on chocolate, you'll see it on cotton, all sorts of things. And it basically indicates that the producers, the farmers, the workers are being guaranteed a fair wage and better working conditions. So it's a real symbol of kind of quality, but also the way it's been produced is ethical. And they're saying it expects to have earned more than £13 million in income from the UK in the last year, slightly more than the 12.8 million it earned in 2022. So apparently a similar thing happened in the financial crisis, a similar trend where people didn't back down from their commitment to kind of fairer trade or kind of ethical purchases just because financially they were feeling the pinch. So yeah, it's kind of this unexpected trend, which doesn't really kind of marry up with kind of what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's surprising because, I mean, personally, people who have been listening to me or reading my stuff for a long time now, they'll know this is something I often come back to in one of the things where I choose, because I'm able to, make certain purchasing decisions which are more aligned with my ethics. And I know some people, not everyone can afford that, not everyone's so bothered about that, but it's something that I've always tried to do. And fair trade is a big one when it comes to, like, say, bananas and chocolate. They're the kind of the key ones. But when you go to other products like meat, I'll always try and ensure there is like a minimum welfare standard of some kind. Ideally free range, but there are certain supermarkets who have a relatively decent one below that, like Waitrose and M&S. They do have a better animal welfare things. But when you do look at a lot of this stuff, it is, I mean, the prices that have gone up everywhere are huge, but the prices that have gone up on some of those products are even more expensive. And like, you know, a chicken could cost you 10 quid in your supermarket if you do want one of those which is more ethically sourced. So I do kind of, it's surprising to see that overall, I appreciate fair trade is different to some of those other kind of standards and different costs come into them as well. But yeah, I really thought that if everything's going up, this is where people might make those sacrifices and realize, actually, I can't for now. I just need to be able to feed the family. I need to be able to get this stuff in and make that sacrifice. So I'm really pleased to see that on the whole, people aren't. And also, although I just spoke about like the chickens getting more expensive, when you do look at things like chocolate, particularly a lot of own brand stuff, do look for that fair trade mark, because that is often across, you know, it doesn't have to be really posh chocolates. It can be just on the basic own brand one, and it can be price per gram. It can be kind of pretty equivalent to the bigger brands, and often I think tastes much better. Sometimes it depends what your own tastes are, aren't they? But it's worth having a look. Is this something that you're fussed about?
Yeah, I'm very interested in like the rise of the conscious consumer. And I think what I guess I kind of consider and what I've heard from other people certainly is that you maybe buy less but buy better. So I think, you know, with the kind of the rise of just general consumerism, I saw lots of it in my friends in lockdown, people just buying things because they were bored or because they wanted to treat themselves to something, like little knickknacks from eBay, or picking up new hobbies and then putting down new hobbies. But kind of, I mean, I was guilty. I did one thing. I bought a cross stitch set. Did I use it? No. I still have it, so one day I might. But I think, yeah, kind of being more conscious of why you're buying things, where it's coming from, the kind of the chain behind it, I think is something I'm really interested in. And I don't want to challenge these figures from the fair trade group, but also it is just coming from kind of one source. But, you know, we've seen what's happened to the Body Shop and kind of challenges these figures, and also a shop near me in Brighton called Hisby. That was an ethical supermarket, and that didn't reopen after Christmas just because it couldn't handle the cost of living crisis. I don't think it ever recovered over the pandemic. And that was all kind of ethical, very considered purchases within the supermarket. And within Brighton, where I live, people were really committed, but it just couldn't compete kind of across the board.
It's interesting what you said there as well about this cross stitch set. You bought it and you didn't use it, and we all do that. There are things we buy that we think we're going to use, and hopefully we do, but stuff's always slipped through from time to time. But that actually brings us on to the next story, where things do slip through, but we can do something about it. What's this one about?
So this wasn't me, thankfully, but there's some figures that have come out which suggest that 13 million adults, which is over a quarter, have accidentally taken out a subscription in the past 12 months, which is costing £688 million overall. So this, again, I think this was a problem in lockdown as well, where you had lots of digital services that were offering a free trial. So maybe like um, a discounted food delivery box or a fitness app, like all of these things that, I see on social media all the time and are very tempting. But lots of people may not realize or forget that if you don't cancel, then you are going to be paying for that service month after month. Um, and also, I have noticed some companies make it very difficult to cancel. So while you might apply online, you might be able to cancel unless you call them up. And then, lots of people don't like doing that. You also might have to talk to someone who's trying to sell you further kind of things or give you a deal. And there's been kind of stories in the past where it's very difficult to kind of contact the company as well to cancel. So yeah, the subscription trap thing is not a new thing. It's been going on for years, but it's definitely changed. Where when I was kind of reporting on it years ago, it was very much like your overseas company. It was a bit dodgy. You signed up for one thing. I got caught out when I was 18. Tooth whitening, toothpaste. Came, great. Don't think didn't work. It was a tiny thing. And then this was back in the day when you had to be sent your bank statements before online banking. So my mum sent me a bank statement. £56 had been taken out by some company I never heard of. Then another 88. Then I was like, I can't even remember what this company is. There's no record of them. And then I found the number and they were based overseas. And yeah, I managed to cancel, couldn't get my money back, but it was a real lesson by these like tempting offers online and how, you need to be careful, basically.
It really, and it's interesting as well that this story said that the number has doubled since a year ago. And like I said, this isn't new. Like I've been reporting on this for 10 years, saying this kind of thing. And it's amazing that, as well, that there are all these new ways, these new subscriptions, new ways of getting stuff, which then you don't sort of take the steps you need to take, that you end up continuously paying for. I mean, things you should be doing. You talked there about a physical statement, that, looking on your banking app or statement, whatever it might be, and just going through. That's the main thing you should be doing, and just checking there's nothing in there which you're kind of, what is this? Sometimes it might be a direct debit, and you can see it in that section of the banking app where all the direct debits are listed, or your standing orders. But sometimes it's called a continuous payment authority, isn't it? A CPA. And that's when you've used your debit card or your credit card for that. So that won't necessarily be listed in a separate list. You'll have to just look for these things that keep appearing. And if you don't recognize them, find out what they are. And then if it's something you're paying for that you're not using, then obviously cancel it. You mentioned about how difficult sometimes they will make you phone up. I spoke about this a couple of months ago on the pod when I cancelled a Which subscription, Which, the consumer champions. I had to phone up to cancel which I'll go on a live chat, which I thought was shocking. But Now TV as well, you can be careful. They're really bad. About 5 times you have to confirm on that journey. Have you had any of those where I want to cancel? Are you sure you want to cancel? Are you really sure?
What about, can we give you this discount to make you stay?
And sometimes that discount is good if you're going to use it. Sometimes it doesn't matter if it's a discount. If you're not going to use it, don't take it. But make sure you've gone through that entire process, and it will make a big difference. If that's a huge number of people, if 1 in 4 adults have done this in the last year, then there's a good chance a number of you listening right now, watching this right now, could hopefully be able to get some, at least stop paying anymore. If you can't claw it back, at least stop paying anymore.
A tip that I use, so I love the skincare trials. I don't know if you've seen the personalized skincare adverts.
Do you know what? I haven't, but no.
Yeah, they're my bag. Cookies has found me. They show me all the time. But as soon as I receive it, I go in and I cancel.
Yeah.
And so it's like a reminder that it's like it's come through my door, so I've got the product, and I'm logging in and I'm canceling, and then I'm done. Lots of people I know as well make a note in their diary when to cancel, if it's kind of, there's different rules or something. But most legitimate companies will accept your cancellation, even if they do make it a bit tricky in terms of the journey. And if it doesn't, just dispute it, put it in writing. And you can always talk to your bank and be like, actually, I've tried with this company, I can't get through to them, or for whatever reason I can't cancel it, and the bank has to cancel the payments once you tell them.
Yeah, absolutely. I do exactly the same thing with reminders as well. It's kind of, I put them in there and it lets me know when to do it, particularly if I've got again, streaming services mainly where I have those subscriptions, but maybe I've got a 3-month deal or whatever it is. I'll make a note for it in that last month, because sometimes if you cancel early, you'll lose those other months. But don't leave it. Either cancel it, say, when it comes to the door, or put that note in as soon as you sign up, because after a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it might be, then it's very easy to forget and let the payment come through. Let's move on now to banks. And there's a couple of stories we want to talk about here with banks. The first, well, there's a couple with Metro Bank. And the first one here is, quickly on this one, a whistleblower has got in touch with the Bank of England about something that's been going on at Metro Bank.
Yeah, there's still not a huge amount of information that's been reported on this, but essentially it's a whistleblower who has expressed concerns about they're like coin counting machines within the branch. I think they're called magic money machines, but I've seen people use them in the branch, and you come along with your pot of coins, put them all in, makes a really loud noise, and it counts them for you. So someone has expressed concern that there's a software issue that links the machine to people's current accounts, and there's some sort of problem there which could leave people vulnerable. Again, yeah, as I said, not a lot of information there, but the Bank of England whistleblower team is looking into it now. But it could essentially mean people are left vulnerable. Hasn't said what details or information like could be compromised, but there's an issue there.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that nothing might have happened. It might be fine. The whistleblower might have sort of said about it before anything has happened, and you'd hope that is the case. But certainly worth, if you are a Metro customer who has used these magic money machines, was it? Then, just maybe keep an eye on this story. But that's not the only thing out of Metro. We know that they've been struggling for a while now, and that they've been reviewing their branches. But they've end of last month they kind of made some changes to some opening hours, which is a shame in a way, isn't it? What are they doing?
There's a big money saving exercise that's going on at Metro Bank. So it's trying to save £50 million a year plus another 30 million by the end of 2024. And so as of the 29th of March, all 76 Metro branches are now closed on Sundays and bank holidays, with more than half of them closing on Saturdays as well, which is really interesting because as an early customer of Metro Bank, maybe 10 years ago, that was one of the draws for me. They were open late, I think till 8 p.m.
Yeah.
They could print off a debit card for you, going at the weekend, all of these services, which was so unlike the high street banks that I knew as a child, which, if you can't get there within the working hours, you just have to, I don't know. I really struggled in lockdown because I was avoiding public transport. So it was really difficult, if I got a check from my granny at Christmas, because, you weren't allowed to see anyone. I was like, I can't get to the bank within the same hours that I work. So Metro Bank was always kind of seeming to do something different. And now it just seems to have moved in line with the rest of the high street.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that was what made Metro stand out against other banks, were those things you spoke about. So you could go after work for a meeting, or even before work, they were open and you could do those things. And the printout debit card thing, I did that once. And admittedly, it was because I needed to switch away from Metro because I wasn't going to use them anymore. My debit card had expired.
Shady.
But I went in, they printed it. 10 minutes later, I had a new debit card. It's a really great idea, which why have the other banks not taken this on? But it obviously isn't working for them. They're having to cut costs. They're still going to be open a little bit later than I think than many other banks. But it is a kind of a sort of a sign of, we know with all the branch closures that are happening across all the big brands that we don't use them. And if you do even offer something that little bit more different, something that maybe would entice you into a branch, it's still not, it's not going to be there now. Which brings us on to the next story, actually, from Nationwide. And this came out just, was it yesterday, I think, or the start of the week?
Mm-hmm.
Their big advert where they talk about never closing branches has been banned as misleading.
Yeah. So unfortunately, it was banned before I could see it. But it stars the actor Dominic West, and he's this like hard-nosed bank manager who's intent on closing branches, and he's clicking his fingers for a green smoothie, and he's taking the mick out of customers. And then at the end of the advert, there's a shot of a nationwide branch, and a voiceover that says, "Unlike the big banks, we're not closing our branches." And it received 281 complaints, which is
Yeah,
loads.
loads of complaints. People were
With
obviously
one,
really upset about it.
yeah, and one was from Santander, which is quite interesting to me.
Yeah,
um, and basically, yeah, the ASA has said it believes the ads would be misleading because customers would think that Nationwide would not be closing branches in the long-term future, and it had not recently closed branches. And so within like the branch closure chaos, because there's been more than almost 6,000
mm.
since January 2015, which is like a rate of 54 a month. It Nationwide's been one that sort of had a commitment to keep the last branch in every town, and it's committed now to kind of keeping every branch that exists open until 2028. So in terms of the branch closures of other providers, it has kind of been holding its space on the high
Yeah.
street. And yeah, I don't know, but what do you think? Would you understand the message to mean it was never going to close a branch again?
I think so, but again, this is the thing. If you are impacted by something, let's say you were at your local Nationwide branch. I think it was like 2 branches at Nationwide had closed 6 months before the advert first aired. So technically, I think, they weren't saying anything that wasn't true. But if your branch had closed and you were someone who relied on that, then I can understand why you might be a little bit angry about it and feel that it was doing a bit of a disservice. But we also had this with Nationwide last year when they announced this dividend for loyal customers. And a huge number of people were really angry about that because they were loyal customers in a different way to what the criteria was. So there is an element slightly of, I think, when people, whether rightly or wrongly, they do feel that if they are individually, even if the majority of people are getting it one way, if they're not getting it, then they've been, they've lost out. And I think that maybe that sort of falls into why they were complained about this. I mean, Nationwide, obviously they've changed the advert and a new advert's been running for a while now, which is clear, and I think that's all fine. What I think will be interesting here is we're not going to cover it in detail in this episode, but obviously there has been further developments in Nationwide's takeover of Virgin Money, and that, if it gets passed and is allowed to happen probably later this year, they will suddenly have all these Virgin Money branches will appear. And although I think they're going to operate, the talk is they will operate individually for a while, for a certain number of few years, ultimately those Virgin Money brand will disappear and it will become Nationwide. So, they're not going to have, if you've got a high street with a Nationwide and a Virgin Money, that's not going to carry on. So they're going to, this promise never to cut branches, I think it's great and I applaud them for doing it. But obviously they're going to have to kind of find the ways around that for that still to be true if they're going to close all the Virgin Money branches. But I seem to remember them saying that if there's a place where there isn't a Nationwide, then obviously that Virgin Money branch would become a Nationwide one. You just wouldn't have 2 of the same. But yeah, it's interesting. Interesting people complain about it. We did have a massive U-turn in the last few weeks from HMRC. What have they been saying and then not saying?
Well, a few weeks ago, The Guardian reported that HMRC was going to close its self-assessment helpline for 6 months. So it'd be shut from April to the end of September. The next day, it reported something different. And in fact, following some feedback from concerned key stakeholders, it was going to cancel the closure of the line. And I love to kind of think of the conversations, ill-advised, absolutely terrible idea, don't do it, why would you? But it's come at an interesting time because the tax office has been heavily criticised for poor customer service. I think there was a report that said, customer service was at an all-time low there. We've had figures saying the average wait time to get through to someone is 16 minutes, which is quite a long time when you're busy. So there's a need for people to get information. They want to talk to real people. But like a number of other organisations, there seems to be this push towards self-service, towards online, towards find it out yourself, YouTube videos, chatbots, webinars, kind of all of these online resources, which can be really useful. But, even with like the best of intentions, sometimes you just want a quick call with someone, especially when it comes to tax and
Yeah.
self-assessment, where you just need someone who knows what they're doing to give you the information. And it doesn't need to take that long. But yeah, there just seemed to be this move away from real people, human services, and phone lines.
And there are some people who still won't be, fully digital or even partially digital, where if you say, oh, you're going looking at it on our website, you can't. And this is obviously bigger than just HMRC, but it does exclude a decreasing but still important number of people who would be like, well, what do I do in this situation? And 6 months is like such a long time to be doing this. It's like, oh yeah, no one worries about tax between April and September. Let's just close it down completely. But all they're going to do, if they had gone ahead with this, was like have all these people suddenly going from October trying to get in touch because they wouldn't have been able to, like say, find the answer. If they could find the answer, great. But if they couldn't, and I've had it in the past, both when I was, as an independent, owning the business, getting in touch when I first had to do VAT and things like that, and things I couldn't get my head around, to just being a punter. And once I with my own kind of situation where those information wasn't available, it just so ridiculous. I mean, the article says that the Telegraph reported that Jeremy Hunt even got involved and was kind of sort of saying you have to kind of change what you're doing here. So it's good that's not happening, but it means they're still going to do something. So I wouldn't be surprised if down the line we get maybe like Metro reduced hours and they're limited.
It's especially ridiculous because of the issues that people have if they don't file on time, and if people don't know how to do it and they put it off and there's no help for them, they'll be fined, or there's consequences further down the line. So it's like, isn't it in everyone's interest that people get the right information and access to the right people to kind of make the whole process smoother and like more reassuring for people who have to do it?
Yeah, and I mean, I've had very recently, I've produced a fair bit of content on tax on savings for everyone because it's a big issue lots of people were concerned about, because rates being higher, the probability of going over the personal savings allowance being that so much more. And one place I have looked for some of this information was within these forums, the HMRC forums, where you can ask a question and their advisors would reply digitally. And there are contradictions, there are mistakes from the advisors, or they just go, someone asks a question, very specific here, and it says, just read this article on .gov.uk. They're like, no, I have read that. It doesn't answer my question. So much of that going on as well. I mean, if you really want to find out about, there is so many things people have answered there, and I have learned a lot from those message boards. But I would really, unless you really, really, really are into it, I would maybe sort of stay clear. But hopefully, if 60-minute wait on the phone, maybe that's all it is. Hopefully, not longer. Talking of long waits, it's like seamless. Like I wasn't even planning this one. Talking of long waits,
it writes itself.
Oh, I am patting myself on the back here. The next story is around what's known as the WASPI women. Who are the WASPI women, and why have they been waiting a long time?
So this is an issue that stems back to the 1995 Conservative government, where as part of the State Pension Act, it included plans to increase the women's state pension age in line with men's. However, the women weren't told. So those expecting to get their state pension at age 60 discovered that they wouldn't get it for another 4, 5, 6 years, like completely throwing their retirement plans into chaos because they weren't ready. There's been some really sad stories about this. Some people have said that they had to sell their homes or go without essentials or rely on their elderly parents to bridge the gap between when they thought they were getting this pension and they were actually going to receive it. We're talking, tens of thousands of pounds out of pocket with some of them. There's around 400 million people, women, who were born in the 1950s who are said to be affected. And now we've had this long-awaited report from the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman, and it's agreed that these thousands of women have been affected by the DWP's failure to actually tell them what was going on. And it's recommended that they should get compensation, but only between £1,000 and £2,950 per person, rather than the £10,000 that campaigners have been calling for. So we've had this, which is great. you know, all of these women have been kind of campaigning for years to kind of have action, to be adequately compensated. However, the ombudsman can't make the government pay. And we've seen the reports that the Department of Work and Pensions has indicated that it will refuse to comply. So now the ombudsman is asking Parliament to intervene.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? This is potentially an astronomical number of people who are, you know, monetarily impacted. Some people wouldn't have been because they might have had, you know, really healthy sort of work pensions, and the state pension wouldn't have made too much difference to their actual quality of life. But, you know, people who really, really, really drastically, I mean, that's such huge sums of money that they were kind of lost out on by this jump from 60 to 65. I can't, I mean, you know, the article says that, you know, the kind of experts think that the government will have to do something, but maybe that kind of compensation will be on the lower end rather than what potentially might be more a fairer amount. So it's kind of like a mixed news, isn't it? It's good news that they, you know, this campaign, which has been going on for such a long time, you know, people really kind of really pushing it quite hard, that that they're right, you know, they've been agreed with, and there should be some compensation, but maybe a bit bittersweet that they're still, despite all of that, still going to be, you know, quite a bit out of pocket for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think those stories, imagine kind of getting to 60 and being like, oh, great, you know, we've come this far after, you know, a working life, and having all of your plans completely thrown out of the window, and then having to borrow money or be supported by your elderly parents. I think, yeah, there's some real kind of heartbreaking stories here, which I think, you know, the government does need to recognise.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple more stories to talk about here. I haven't got a clever link between people getting the state pension and Legoland. If you've got one,
Can't win
please
them
share
all.
with us. No. So why are we talking about Legoland now?
So Merlin Entertainments, which runs Legoland, Alton Towers, and other attractions all over the world, is going to be asking people to pay more to visit, say, on like a sunny bank holiday or a sunny Saturday compared to a rainy day midweek, like in term time, as part of its new dynamic pricing. So this means its machine learning will, yeah, the prices will basically respond to demand.
It's Uber
So it
Surge, isn't it,
already,
for theme parks, basically?
yeah, so it already uses peak and off-peak pricing, which we'll all be familiar with. You know, you get it on transport, you kind of, yeah, you get it with holidays. So that's kind of what it already has in place. But this is like, seems like a much more kind of instantaneous reaction to the weather or to, you know, how many tickets have been sold that morning. And it's going to apply the new pricing to 20 attractions this year.
It's mad. It's a lot, isn't it? I think it's interesting when we think about, like I said before, it's basically Uber Surge, but for theme parks. This sort of dynamic pricing, we do see it in more places than we possibly realise. And sometimes we just accept it. I think, you know, something like Uber, you're like, oh, well, what do? You either get it or you wait and see if it drops down, but the risk is it gets more expensive, which I once did on a night out in Leeds. I refused to get the taxi because it was so like ridiculously expensive back home. So I just kept.
So what, you walked?
No, I stayed out later and later and later. It was stupid, really. In hindsight, I would have just paid the extra. But anyway, but yeah, we're used to it there. But I think there is something quite. It's not great, and we don't like it. But when you move that over to something like a theme park attraction, there's already, to say, peak and off peak. There's already a premium put in place for going at a time when you know more people want to go, and that's business. That's, you know, that's capitalism, isn't it? But this strikes me as, you know, I'm interested just quite how much extra higher those prices go, because you're often, not always, you're dealing with kids. And what do you say? Oh, we're going to the theme park. What, you know? Oh no, do you know what? It's just gone up by another 20 quid per head. You're not going to want to let your kid down and disappoint them. I mean, the way around this is to pre-book. And we've spoken, when we do deals of the week, we share quite often some of those ways to kind of get 2-for-1 tickets and booking in advance for places like theme parks. But yeah, I think it's it'd be interesting to see what the reaction is from punters when this happens. Does it have the opposite
Yeah,
effect?
I'm kind of anticipating backlash. Like, I wouldn't want to pay But it's quite interesting with Merlin saying it's trying, it's introducing this type of pricing to optimize customer experience and avoid overcrowding at peak times. So I kind of, yeah, that kind of presentation, it's like, we're doing it for the customers. Like, this is going to be a good thing for everyone. I just don't think is going to wash. But yeah, when I was sort of reading around, like if other companies do this, last year, the pub group that owns Slug and Lettuce said it would also be introducing it. And I found out that they already charge an extra 50p a pint during the England matches in the last two World Cups. And
Wow.
I would never, if I found that out, I'd be like, nah, I'm going somewhere
Yeah.
else. And that's quite a significant markup per pint just to watch the game. And yeah, so I'm like, would there be times? Because I think if it was Uber and I really want to get home, I'd probably pay it. But there's definitely scenarios where I'd be like, nah.
I mean, there is a flip side to this as well, because dynamic pricing isn't just in these cases where prices going up. It could mean prices come down. So you might find that with the theme parks, you can benefit from that if you've got that flexibility and no one's turned up because it's been raining all morning, but by the afternoon it's a nice sunny day and you can like, oh, 2 o'clock, you can go along for the rest of the day. You might be able to get much cheaper tickets. So that's an interesting way. And the Too Good To Go, which is the app where you can buy food at a reduced price at the end of the day, so it doesn't get kicked out, thrown out by like restaurants and cafes and bars and stuff. Some places do dynamic pricing there as well. So Leon, for example, I've seen them that the later you get in the day, the closer to closing time, if they've still got food or they've got a lot of food left over, again, those prices can drop down as well. So there are ways we can potentially take advantage of dynamic pricing as well. But I do think this is a kind of we're going to be talking about this a lot more. I imagine over this year this will pop up again with more places wanting to do it. I saw that a US airline just this week announced they're going to be doing it for bags. So the busier a flight is, the more expensive it's going to be for you to check in a bag, which is crazy. You can have supermarkets. Have you ever been to one of the supermarkets where they've got digital prices rather than the little plastic labels? Again, if they wanted to, they could go, do you know what's really, it's a nice hot day? You could have this. It's a nice hot day. Everyone's going in and buying barbecue gear. Let's put up the price of sausages. You could do that at any moment they want. That's where we're going potentially with these things. But for now, roller coasters.
Yeah. And isn't it a roller coaster? Dynamic pricing.
Now, the last story here actually mentioned that about the that US airline with bags. We've got another airline bag story just to share with people. That's sad, disappointing news, I think.
Do you remember when the 100 milliliter liquid rule was introduced? Because I do. And it was suddenly, I don't know, suddenly things just became really strange in the airport. Those little bags with the liquids and like all of the people who would never get it right. I don't know. It was an interesting time.
Yeah,
And
do you
so
know what? 2004. I can't believe, or 2006, something like that. It's been that long that we've been doing this with the airports, which strikes me as I can't believe it's been that long. But yeah.
yeah, and people still get it wrong. so, so yeah. So basically there's been a lot of discussion about the rules changing again. However, we are going to have to wait another year for this 100 milliliter limit to be lifted. So it's not going to change until June 2025. And so the hold up is we're waiting for these 3D scanners to be installed at airports, and these will basically be more accurate and they'll be able to detect kind of threats such as explosives without the liquids needing to be removed. And so when the rules are changed, the 100 milliliter limit will be increased to 2 litres. So that's what you'll be able to kind of carry on board with you.
Yeah, I think it is a disappointment. And I was looking at flights the other day, and with some of the real budget airlines, which have not flown on them for a long time, since before the pandemic, the EasyJets and the Ryanairs, just how much more expensive it is to get bags, to pay for bags full stop, and the sizes of them are so confusing. And all those kind of things. It's like, if you could just carry on some liquids rather than having to sort of pay for this one here, pay for something to go in the hold, it would just make our lives so much easier. But I think we're just gonna have to wait. I think there could be some airports which do this earlier, and maybe you can check before you fly. I've definitely had it in destinations where it's been okay. So flying back's been all right, but you've still got to have the little travel bottles, decanting things, whatever it might be, making sure you leave things at home, or buying for check-in if our airports aren't going to cover it.
What liquids are you trying to smuggle on board? above 100 milliliters.
No, but let's say a bottle of wine. You put duty free.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
duty free is slightly different, isn't it? Because duty free, you're fine. But let's say you bought it in the country you're at. I know, appreciate we're going back and forth, but those things, you're not going to decant a bottle of vodka that you've bought, are you, or something like that, into small 100 ml things. So all those kind of things that come into play. Once restriction, okay, 200 ml is still not massive for some things, but that kind of flexibility you might have with hand luggage and will make, I think, a big difference.
Yeah, I've got kind of into it. I've got my little pots, I've got my little bottles, and I might, decant the sun cream, one of like the special little bottles. But I
Yeah.
have seen absolute disasters, like at the security bit of the airport. Like a friend of mine, she was like, "Oh God, yeah, I think they made her throw away her perfume.
Yeah,
She
I've
had like a
seen that.
100 milliliter bottle. No, must have been more. But
Yeah,
yeah, like expensive
yeah.
perfume."
Well, that is all we've got time for in this episode. Thank you so much for doing this with me, Amelia. And we are going to be back and say doing this again every single week, every sort of Thursday or Friday, with a roundup of the top money stories, helping you know what's been going on and how it affects you. We'd love to know what you think about it as well. So do let us know if you're watching this on YouTube in the comments below what you think of this format. It'd be great to help us really shape this in the future so it's doing the best it possibly can for you. Well, yeah, thank you, Amelia.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you guys next week.